The production of this video was made possible by donors to the Orchestration Online Patreon initiative and this channel's Buy Me a Coffee page. Please consider adding your support to the creation of free educational internet resources by visiting the links in the information below.
Never use the marking A1 to indicate a single player at woodwind or brass entrances. Always indicate which player by the number of their seat, number 1, number 2, and so on. In my work of coaching composers preparing for professional performances and recording sessions, and in reviewing hundreds of scores for my annual orchestration challenges, I never ran across the mistaken marking A1. Then about 4 years ago, there was a sudden explosion of A1 in many scores that came my way. So many that I have since suspected that some general source had set the example for hundreds of composers in my community. And I have been searching for that source ever since. Some composers assure me that they've seen it in other scores, but I've yet to be shown an example of the marking in a professionally published or prepared orchestral score. It seems as if many composers, and I mean absolutely nothing negative toward you, the viewer, if you were one of them, saw the marking A2, A2 in Italian, and presumed if that only the first player were needed, then the proper marking for that was to simply reduce the number to 1, resulting in A1. But that is completely, totally wrong. The marking A2 literally means with 2 players in Italian. And when you indicate A1, you are telling the score reader that all you want is 1 player. But you're not telling us which player. You may think, well, it's obvious that I mean the first player because I wrote the number 1. But that just creates further confusion, because if you establish that A1 means use the first player, then chances are that you've misunderstood the meaning of the original marking A2 to mean that only the second player is intended. A1 for player number 1, and A2 for player number 2. Even more perplexingly, there are quite a few other usages of A1 or A1 in music that have nothing to do with wind or brass entrances, like rehearsal numbers, or the scientific pitch name of the second lowest A on the piano, in the first full octave, therefore A1, or even an initial that's short for audio engineer number 1. Sometimes in pop music, which gets orchestrated a lot these days, the artists may classify their song structure with the first part of the A section being called A1. All of these latter markings are legitimate, but the use of A1 to indicate a single wind or brass player at an entrance is not. So what's the proper usage? It's incredibly simple. Remember that every multiple wind or brass player is known by their own number. The first clarinetist is number 1. The second is number 2. And so on. If you intend that only a single player play an entrance, or anywhere else, on their first bar, you mark the number of that player. For the first chair, that's the number 1. And never, never A1. For the second chair, mark the number 2. And not A2, or A2, in case you thought that that's what it meant. And so on. Number 3 for third, number 4 for fourth, and even number 8 for eighth horn if you're working on your Mahlerian fever dream opus. If you have a staff that includes only 2 players, you may combine them into a single unison voice with the marking A2, but in the same vein as before, if there are 3 players on a staff, as with trumpets quite frequently, and you only want a unison of 2 players, then you must mark the numbers along with A2, like number 1, number 2, A2. This is the standard approach for any single voice unison combination that's less than the numbers of the players on a staff. Please take note, A2 is always for combining 2 instruments into a single voice. It never applies to intervals, nor does A3, A3, to chords, except in some band music. Furthermore, you always need to indicate which number player on a solo. You can't just write the word solo and think that everyone will assume that it means the first player. And never write solo just to indicate only one player, because a solo is always a featured line standing out from the rest of the orchestra. Worst of all is to write out a single line on a multiple instrument staff with no number whatsoever. Which player are we to think is meant in that case? But whatever you do, do not ever, ever, ever use A1 again. Period. Sorry to rant like that, but I just had to get that off my chest and into its own bite-sized video tip for all my viewers and community members. If I just saved you as a composer a few back-and-forth emails with your conductor or orchestra management, or if I saved you as a teacher from having to explain the problem endlessly and correct the error in dozens of students' scores, then it would be great if you could shout me a cup of hot chocolate over on the channel's Buy Me a Coffee page, or consider supporting on Patreon. Tiny donations and minimal support levels are totally welcome and hugely appreciated. Stay tuned, because I have a couple of longer, more juicy orchestration tips coming over the next couple of weeks.
Fredo, you're my older brother, and I love you.
But don't ever write A1 on a clarinet entrance again.